reading is everywhere these days. So what exactly does that look like in an upper elementary classroom? In this video, I'm sharing what I've learned about the science of reading and what it looked like in my classroom this past year. If you're new here, I'm Rachel Vincent and I have been teaching for 19 years. I am a 4th grade teacher in South Carolina, and I love sharing ways to help teachers simplify their classrooms and their lessons. So what is the science of reading? Well, it is really a body of research about reading and writing and how the brain works, and it is research that has been conducted for the past 50 plus years. Many of these things we already know and do as teachers, but it's also bringing to the forefront some best practices that we have really just kind of pushed to the side. This is actually not the first time I've recorded this video. This is the 3rd time I did it. The first one I recorded back in the fall, and then a podcast called Sold a Story came out. And this podcast sort of really helped me understand why I was taught the way I was taught just in school myself, and how to teach reading, and why things just didn't seem to really click for me. I really struggled, especially when I taught 2nd grade, thinking I was a terrible reading teacher because I wasn't taught how to teach reading correctly. Once I listened to that podcast, and I will link that down below in the description, I wanted to re-record this video so I could put this information about the podcast, because it is a very well-informed podcast about some publishers that have really for lack of a better word, taught us how to teach reading wrong. So that was on my list of things to re-record in February, and I did record it, but I never got around to posting it because if you watched my video a couple weeks ago about how hard this past school year has been, I just sort of stopped doing anything outside of school. So how did I really get started into the science of reading? Well, it was sort of everywhere on Instagram world. Some of the teachers I follow were sharing different things about this. I really started thinking about my niece who struggles with reading, and I was thinking, man, these strategies could really help her. So just a primary girl who teaches 1st grade and is Orton Gillingham trained and shares lots of wonderful things. I would encourage you to follow her on Instagram. Shared a webinar to really good stuff. And so I decided, I think it was like spring of 2022, that I took this webinar, and it really sort of opened my eyes to how to teach reading, how the brain works, how kids sound out words. The first person that popped in my head was my niece. I would highly encourage anyone who's not sure about the science of reading and how it would apply to whether you teach younger kids or older kids like I do, because I do have struggling readers in my class. I will link their summer 2023 workshops and webinars below. They are very informative, and it was very helpful for me to sort of start this journey in my classroom. I ended up tutoring my niece last summer using the Really Great Reading summer program that they offered for free. And while I was using it the whole time, because she was going into 4th grade last year, I was like, I need this in my classroom. My struggling readers really need this. So I took what I learned from that tutoring program, from that webinar, and a few books that I read over the summer last year, and incorporated that into my ELA lessons this past year. Keep in mind that I, in my 19 years that I have taught, have never had really good quality reading training. The majority of my training is from reading workshop models, and it never really taught me how to teach children how to read. I was not taught phonics in school. I was never taught how to teach phonics, so a lot of this stuff was sort of brand new to me. Of course, I knew the sounds, letters, and digraphs, and things like and blends and things like that. I knew sort of the basics, but not really how to help students. And so one of the things that I incorporated into my first lessons for our word study this year were the 6 syllable types. That webinar from Really Great Reading was really key in helping me to understand the different ones so that I could help teach my students the different ones. Now, there's research out there that says they don't necessarily have to know the different types, but I found it very beneficial to teach it to my kids. It helped them break up those multisyllabic words that they see so often in 4th grade reading. And probably the best lessons that I taught my students was the schwa sound. Anytime my students were trying to read or spell a word, when we would get to that schwa sound, we would talk about how it could be any vowel. So we try multiple different ones and they could easily figure it out, especially reading. Decoding was a lot easier. Of course, encoding, where they were writing it and spelling it, is a little bit trickier, but they were able to read and spell so much better this year. After we did our about 6-ish weeks of syllables, we moved into morphology, which are prefixes, suffixes, roots, and and base words. Now, I have always incorporated that somehow into my classroom, but I never felt really good at what I was doing because, again, my district gave us a list of prefixes and suffixes and was just like, go to town, figure it out. And I was never trained or learned how to teach it properly. I took a workshop called Unlocking SRO, and there was a morphology session that I watched, and it really helped me figure out how to sort of help teach my students morphology, how to make it work. And I did it this year. I think it was beneficial. I am going to tweak it for next year and do things differently because I think there needs to be more application. It was a lot of just conversations about those prefixes and suffixes. I feel like there needs to be more application to help it stick a little more. Please keep in mind, I am not an expert in this. Yes, I have been teaching a long time and I feel like I'm an expert in other areas, but when it comes to this, it is probably one of my weaker areas. Again, because I've never been trained properly. I did not learn this in college. I did not learn this in school myself. So I have a lot of gaps of knowledge, and so I am doing reading and research, and I follow people on Instagram, and I'm constantly learning of how to do it better. Most of what is out there for the science of reading, which is not a program, it is just research, but a lot of it is that phonemic awareness and phonics, which is really great for your emerging readers, for your lower grades, for your struggling students who are still having trouble decoding. There's so much about that out there that there is a lot missing for upper elementary. So I have found a few people that I follow that give really good information. They give that phonics and phonemic awareness stuff as well, but they also give great things on vocabulary, morphology, reading comprehension, writing, and all those different things. First, I want to share the 3 books that I bought last summer and read to really help me. The Logic of English really helped me when I was figuring out my syllable lessons because I created it all from scratch. So it helped me to sort of understand why certain words and spelling patterns go together and what words and things like that. So it was really more of a resource for me, not necessarily what I could use for my students. I bought the Writing Revolution because I plan writing, grammar, and word study for my grade level. So I really wanted to sort of up our writing. It's a great book and I highly recommend it. It's a lot about how students need to understand to comprehend at a sentence and paragraph level before they can really comprehend at a multi-paragraph passage. So it really broke it down. A lot of these lessons we did at the beginning of the year as we were introducing our grammar lessons, and it all kind of just fit together, and I would recommend that book as well. Differentiated Literacy Instruction in Grades 4 and 5 was a really great book of how to structure your ELA block. I will say I probably didn't use this as much this past year because it really would go well for somebody who plans both writing and reading and all of ELA. Like I said, I do writing, grammar, and word study, and somebody else on my team does reading. We do collaborate, but this is a new way of sort of planning based on what my district currently does. And so I knew it would be just too much to try and figure out how to make that work. So I'm hoping this coming year I'll be able to incorporate some of those into my own personal classroom, maybe not grade level wise. My favorite people to follow on Instagram, the first one is Reading Rachel. She shares a lot of reading comprehension, which is very much what we do in the upper grades. And yes, I do the syllables and morphology whole group, and then in my small groups I do more phonics, phonemic awareness based stuff with my students who need work with decoding, but the majority of my students really just need work with comprehension. She is a wealth of knowledge, constantly learning and researching and giving you articles and places to go look to find even more information about things she's sharing. Campbell Creates Readers is another great person to follow. She is the person who did the session on morphology that I learned from. She shares when they're doing more Unlock SRO, mini virtual conferences and things like that. So I would encourage you to follow her too. And then there are several more that I will list below in the description that if you would like to follow and learn more about the science of reading. There is a Facebook group for grades 3rd and up all about the science of reading, and I will link that one below. There is a lot of information in there. I would use caution with it because some of the people are very passionate about it, and if somebody says something, you know how Facebook goes, it's not always kind. Most of the time it is, but I would caution maybe just jumping in into the conversation and kind of be a lurker like I am, I found some great resources and things like that that people will post for free and different things like that. All of these resources and links and people to follow I will put below. I will put the link to the Sold a Story podcast. I highly recommend starting there if you are like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but it really has sort of changed how my students are reading. We know that there is a gap in reading because of the pandemic and different things, and I saw so much growth in my students this year. I was very happy with what I was doing, and I can't wait to continue and to tweak it to make it better in the following year. If you're interested in seeing a little glimpse of teaching the syllables in action, I included it in a vlog from earlier this school year, so check out the video that's on your screen now.